Do you ever wake up in the morning and say to yourself, what in the world is going on? The whole place went to hell in a handbag and you don't even own a handbag. I'm telling you, if you want Xanax through your hearing aids, then this is the thing you should do. You should listen to the Randi Lupo show because she covers everything from comedians to writers and everything in between. She's entertaining and informative at the same time. She's everything that you wished your mother-in-law would be, and she isn't. But Randi, she was born in Brooklyn, New York, a different Brooklyn than most, a 2 bears over. Randi brings his unique outlook to the show, and Lord knows we do need a different outlook. So now, put down your lattes, get your fat ass sitting down wherever you are, because you're about to see and hear something you never heard before. And that's our host, Randi Lupo.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the studio today. I have a special guest, Bo Blaze. He's an alternative life coach who wrote the book 50 Shades of Curious in reaction to the book 50 Shades of Grey. Welcome today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
And I'm happy that you are here.
Cool.
Let me ask you, so what do you think about this movie 50 Shades of Grey?
Well, you know, it's a double-edged sword. Let's put it that way. I think that the book, when it first came out, it was interesting because when it came out, it was very quiet, right? Because Kindle had just started.
Yeah.
And it was one of those books that people had heard about and they could read it privately, download it privately. They didn't have to go to the bookstore and get it. And all of a sudden, millions of books started to get sold. And the next thing you know, people started to look at each other and go, wow, millions of books. And somebody else read it, and somebody else read it. And then all of a sudden, 10 million people have 10 million books and 20 million. It just went crazy. Until then, people were reading it right on the subway, like, haha, look at my 50 Shades of Grey. So,
Right.
So the great thing about it for the alternative sexuality world is that it was a wonderful moment where it desensitized something that was stigmatized for a long time, right? People were used to sort of looking at people who are in alternative sexuality and say, you people are sick and crazy and wrong. And about 6 months later, literally in 6 months, those same people, if you ask them, would say, nah, it's that 50 Shades of Grey stuff. So it was a huge moment in time for the alternative sexuality community, the book, and of course the movie, just sort of normalizing alternative sexuality. Where it's not so great sometimes is that both the movie and the book, you know, they were written to be a romance novel.
Sure.
They were not written to be a factual blow by blow of how to do BDSM.
Did you think it was more, the book 50 Shades of Grey was more of a love story?
Well, I think it was just the perfect romance novel, you know, and even the characters and the virgin and it's a romance novel, literally by the ABCs, you know what I mean? And so what happened is, though, again, people then would read this book and go, oh, so this is how you do BDSM. And we say, no, not necessarily. Hold on, because there are a lot of good things in the book and the movie. It talks about consent, and BDSM can't exist in the absence of consent. We say that, in other words, if there is no consent, then it's abuse. It's not BDSM. It's abuse.
Yes,
it's not
I
BDSM.
understand. Let me ask you something. I jumped right into the book, but why don't you tell us, what is an alternative life coach?
An alternative life coach. Well, I coach, I'm a professional certified coach, PCC certified with the ICF, which is the International Coach Federation. So went to school, did all that, kind of had a time in my life where I had been working with people, alternative people in my life for many years, and I decided I wanted to get more into this. It's always something I really enjoy doing, working with people, helping with people. So I went back to school, got my coaching certification, but I wanted to work with people who are alternative of any nature. And certainly sexuality is a big part of that, but also entertainers, comedians, actors, just anybody whose life is a little left of center and needs somebody who could coach when, if they're interested in a coach that would be able to not judge them on their left of center lifestyle.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. And your book, 50 Shades of Curious, that was written in response to 50 Shades of Grey?
Yeah, as we were saying before, basically...
I really like the tie. It's very
you
nice.
like the tie?
Yeah.
We had to go find it, so it was a good one. I'm glad.
That's not your tie.
No, I'm glad you liked it because I had to find a black and blue one. Anyway, yes, what happened was when we were saying when the book came out, and we were concerned because we were saying that there's consent in it, and there's you talk about contracts and negotiating, and these are all really important concepts, and they're in there. But in the book, the consent is coerced in many ways. Okay, he sort of dangles big, expensive gifts and forcing her, sign my contract, and so as a community, the alternative community didn't like that part of it, right? And there's a lot of things in there that aren't especially, the way we would like people to be able to be safe, and so I had been, and still am, the novice facilitator for the Oil and Spiegel Society in New York, which is TES, TES, and I've been their facilitator for 13 years and working with novices. So,
And what do you do with them?
Basically it's a educational meetings, and we meet once a month on the second Wednesday of every month in New York, and we just basically do classes on all kinds of novice BDSM, and people can ask questions about anything they like and get any kind of information they want, see if maybe they're interested or either just curious, and so this has been my passion for a very long time. So what I really wanted to do, I've always sort of wanted to write a book, but this was perfect for me in my mind. It was like, let me take all my 13, well, at that point, like 11 years of doing this, and let me really put all my advice and everything that I find important for people to know down in a book, and then call it 50 Shades of Curious, so that people, hopefully, who think they know what they're doing from 50 Shades of Grey, might buy the book and then go, oh, this is how you really do it.
I think that was very smart. I think that was very smart. So this is definitely an alternative lifestyle. Do you think all people are curious about this kind of alternative lifestyle?
Well, I don't know if they're curious about BDSM specifically. Some people aren't, but I think everybody has fetishes. I think everybody, if they're really being honest, no one is just PIV, penis and vagina sex, missionary position, every night. I'm very satisfied. I doubt that's the case.
What is a fetish?
A fetish is anything that you basically sexually excites you that is not in the norm, what somebody would consider the norm.
And do you think a fetish is a healthy thing, or?
Yeah, and also I should say, in other words, when something's an unhealthy fetish, it's something that you would obsess over to the point where it would affect your life.
Could you give an example of that?
Well, there's just recently the DSM, I believe it's called, the manual that doctors use.
I read that's like my Bible. Right. I diagnose everyone with that. Yeah. Well, mostly myself, of course. But
psychiatrists, up until just recently, having fetishes was a diagnosis. So what they've changed it to is that when it affects your lifestyle, so in other words, when somebody's saying that they may have like a fetish, let's say a foot fetish, right? Very common fetish. So somebody might have a foot fetish, but if their foot fetish causes them to sit online, watch porn, spend thousands of dollars on that porn, touch women inappropriately in the subway, that is something that's affecting their life. That can be a diagnosis. Someone who just enjoys feet and likes to masturbate and look at feet, that's not a diagnosis. That's just a fetish. That's a normal fetish.
And if they could hold a regular job,
right,
that would be considered normal. But I guess it becomes a problem when they can't hold a job?
Yes, that's where it becomes a diagnosis as far as
right,
the psychology world feels.
Wow. So do you have other colleagues in this field?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a large amount of people who are educators and in the community, and they're all over the country. And different people do. A lot of people don't know that there are events all over. Like I was just speaking about the TES, the Oil and Spiegel Society. There's groups like that all over the country, and people teach and all over the country. And there's big events you can go to that are like 3-day conventions, and there's all kinds of things if you look for it. When people ask me, quickly, how could I find some of those? I usually suggest that they go to a website called FetLife, which is www.fetlife.com. And FetLife is sort of the Facebook of the kinky world. So that's someplace you could find events and different things people are talking about and people.
And how do people know if they want to be the dominant or submissive? And it's like the BDSM. What does BDSM stand for?
Well, let me answer your question first, is that you shouldn't worry about what you are. You should just be. And you do not, the only reason that people really say, well, I'm a sub or I'm a dom is kind of like, so it helps them figure out who they can date on Friday night. You know what I'm saying? Right. But the reality is it's not important. In other words, you might be very dominant with this person, but feel extremely submissive with that person. And maybe you're just in a partnership and you and your loved one switch back and forth and you just like to have a little kink before you have sex. And that's awesome too. There's no one right way. I always say that, there is no one way to do BDSM, right? It's consent is the only thing.
So that consent is the only rule.
Right. There are no rules except for consent.
Okay.
Right.
That makes sense.
So getting back to saying that it's not important for you to feel like you have to decide what you are. You can just say, I'm figuring it out. That said, if you like to be the one who is doing the things to people, you would be considered the top or the dominant. And if you would prefer having things done to you, then you would mostly be considered a bottom and possibly the submissive. Answering your question about BDSM, BDSM is actually an acronym with three different things. It's BD, which is bondage and discipline, SM, which is sadomasochism, but in the middle, DS, which is dominance and submission.
Do they all have to do with one another or not necessarily?
Well, they do. They're very harmonious, but they aren't necessarily always the same, because when you say sadomasochism, we're talking about just the actual act of enjoying inflicting or receiving pain. There are people who are into BDSM who have no interest in pain. There are people who have no interest in anything but pain. So what that might mean is you may have a person who says, look, I don't want to have any of this, I'm the great master of all space and time. I just like you to hit me. Hit me, please. That's a masochist, right? They don't want any...
What does hitting do for them? Like, what does the pain do for them?
Well, studies show, that when you are in pain, your body releases all kinds of chemicals, right? So for a lot of people, it's their drug of choice. And pain is something that lets them, it gives them catharsis as well. It's both emotionally cathartic and physically, in the sense that, like I said, you get a tremendous, some people more than others, but people, when they are playing, they get a tremendous rush.
And this is considered play therapy?
No, play therapy is actually something, there is something called play therapy, which at one point was mostly for children, but in New York it was...
children could do this?
No,
BDSM as well.
just play therapy. It's a form of psychological therapy. What I'm saying is that there's a group in New York that takes it with adults, and they actually do find play therapy very similar to BDSM, with adults only.
Sure.
And they, that's because they feel that it's very similar in that what people in play therapy do is they reenact things from their past to derive power over them, right? So what they do is, if you might have trauma at a young age, they would help you by kind of reenacting that trauma and realizing that you can control it now. So that you bring that up, it's interesting because it actually is, a lot of people feel BDSM is similar in the sense that if you had past trauma and you're...
Or abuse.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So in other words, a lot of people, and this is a very serious thing, because you have a lot of people who, first of all, the numbers of molestation and abuse in this country are staggering. They're disgustingly high, in the sense that you're talking about, anywhere. It's very hard to put a number on, but depending on the study, 25 to 50% of everybody is going to be somehow molested at some point, or sexually abused at some way in their life, which is horrible. So, you're dealing with that. You have a tremendous amount of this in our world.
Right.
People being abused. So when people do have a molestation or something like that happens in their life, often they will sexualize that later in life. And
what do you mean sexualize that?
Perhaps that you had somebody touched you inappropriately, and you may grow up and subtly start realizing that you kind of fantasize about people touching you inappropriately. And now what happens very often is you feel horrible. You feel like, I am disgusting. What is wrong with me? Something very bad happened to me, and now I sexualize that. And I think that's terrible, because now you're just getting abused again, right?
But by yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So the reality is this. Look, as long as it's consensual and as long as it's with adults, the reality is you should you should never feel bad about what turns you on as long as it's a consensual thing. You're not hurting anybody else. There's no sense in letting you be abused again. So this is what play therapy says, that if, and not that you should, but if you happen to sexualize your pain from the past, you will very often actually derive power over it and then feel some relief from it.
So this could be a healing tool?
Yeah, I will say this. We are not psychiatrists. BDSM, and we try to say that, very specifically that no, our job is not to be psychiatrists. Your dominant is not your psychiatrist,
Right.
ever. Okay, but just as a great bonus on the side is that when you replay things and you are true to yourself and you play with things that you really truly fantasize, then there is a great bonus that sometimes it actually heals you as well from trauma in the past.
That would be fantastic.
It is, and it's all part of the guilt and the shame that people are sort of socialized with their whole life, and so they would never, they go through their whole life and they fantasize about something but would never talk to anybody about it or play it out, and that's damaging just in itself. But it's terrible that people have that much, guilt and shame, and they don't feel like they can let that out.
Well, and you're able to help these people let it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a big part of what I do when I coach people who are into alternative sexuality. A lot of people just need somebody that doesn't think they're a freak.
Now, what do you consider alternative sexuality? This or you're also part of the LGBTQ?
Yeah, absolutely. Any type of alternative sexuality, BDSM specifically, we were talking about before, but and that's also because it's a little less understood than, let's say, the gay and bisexual world that's out there. However, the trans and queer community has a tremendous amount of people who are not kind to that community and have a lot of stigma. So just having somebody that they feel comfortable talking to and being able to talk about that and let them know that these are normal urges is definitely part of what I do. However, finding ways to do it with other people is even more. The idea of very often you might have a partner and your partner you've never done this with your partner. Right? But you all of a sudden wake up one day and go, I have always wanted a spanking. Right? But how am I going to get the spanking? My partner is going to say I'm nuts. Right. I got to go to Bellevue. Right? It's whole Jackie Gleason routine. Okay, anyway. And what do you do? So a lot of what I do is help people communicate with each other, learn techniques to work with each other. And
so you see couples?
I do. I see couples and singles, groups, all of the above. Yeah.
Interesting. I love your quote that says, when you stop growing, you start dying. Sorry, when you stop growing, you start dying.
Yes, and that's, I think, really true. I mean,
I like that.
For me, there's people, unfortunately, tend to kind of just pop out a couple kids and kind of wait to die a lot of times. They just sit in front of the television and they do the same thing for the last 40 years of their life. And that's incredibly sad. I
know. They should have some kinky sex.
Well, kinky sex or anything. Go out and hit whatever. I don't know, play soccer, anything. But the point is that that's what, for me, people being able to grow, right? You die the minute you stop trying to grow. And many of us just stop growing. And that's what is the killer, I think, for anybody's soul, is that when you stop growing as a person, when you stop wanting to learn things, when you stop wanting to try new things, that's when you die.
I love that part of the book. And you weren't only talking about sexuality. You're talking about doing art, yoga.
Yeah, as a matter of fact.
Spiritual practices.
Absolutely. I think that, BDSM is something that you can also just use and have a little hot sex with your partner. Nothing wrong with that. But for a lot of people, what I was saying in the book was whether it's art or, BDSM or anything, the idea is finding something that makes you want to learn and grow and do more things and interact and grow as a human being. And it doesn't matter to me what medium you use, and it's just just anything that keeps you from dying inside.
Do you find that artists are more open to this BDSM lifestyle?
I find absolutely that the more creative and non-traditional that somebody is, I think those are the kind of people that are very open to exploring different things, including their sexuality.
But would you have a client, let's say, that works on Wall Street as well? Like, could that happen?
Oh,
A
absolutely.
straight-laced, someone who seems totally straight-laced?
Yes, you'll find that specifically many people who are that type A, really very driven, dominant human in their life, very often has a need to let that go and be submissive. It's not something they can do at work. It's not something they can do, at home maybe. And so they may be seeking a partner that they can let it go and just be helpless in the sense that I don't have to think about anything, whereas at work I have to think about everything. So it is very common, yeah.
Now, do a lot of people think that the submissive partner is the weaker partner? Is that the connotation? Is that true? Is it not true?
It's only true if that's what you're playing, because the point is you're playing a role. Everyone is equal. There is no, even if you are playing that role very often, even if that's how you feel inside, the point is that there is no slavery, right? There is no such, that it's not a legal concept, right? So the idea is that we're all equal. And when we talk about consent, we're talking about the fact that everybody should be able to say no or stop, or I need to talk about this, or this is not okay for me, And so
how do you stop it? But with safe words? Or
well, yeah, safe words, I
what
guess.
are there universal safe words, or does each couple, or do they figure out their own? How does that work?
Well, some people figure out their own. The very common ones are the color red for a stoplight, red, and sometimes even yellow. If you want to just slow down, you say yellow. And the word safe word itself is a common one. The reason no or stop is not a good safe word is because we like to scream, no, stop, don't, sometimes when we play, right? So that's why there is such a thing as safe words, because we need to be able to keep it consensual. However, we were talking briefly before about maybe somebody who's just a masochist. Somebody who's a masochist they're not engaging in play acting with you. You know what I mean? They're just like, here, it's just me and you. Hit me, please. I want you to hit me. That is very different. And that safe word would be okay for you to say, or him to say, stop. Because you guys are not playing with each other or oh no, you know what I mean? Like you're not
saying that's a non-sexual type of a thing?
Well, it's not that even it's non-sexual. It's just that we're not doing any role play in that because it's purely masochistic or sadistic, right? But very rarely is that ever the case. And that's why we always try to use safe words, because very often we like to pretend we don't like it.
Right.
See what I'm saying?
I do. I do. And people who are into S&M, do you think that do you think that they have abuse in their background? That's why they're into it? Or do you think that's just how they're wired? What is your take on that?
As we spoke before, the sad thing is that so many people are abused, and people have tried to pervert the numbers and say, people into BDSM all have abuse in their background. And it's like, no. Everybody has abuse in their background. When they look at the numbers are absolutely the same. So there is no correlation between being into SM and necessarily that you have any more or less abuse than anybody else. So the reality is that it's just not true. It's something that people have tried to pretend for a long time, but it's not true.
Right. What I wanted to ask you about is, what about polyamorous relationships? Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that's another thing that I do a lot of work with. And
could you tell us what
sure.
that is?
Polyamory just really technically means many loves.
How many can you have? Is it limitless?
It is an unlimited amount, but that would make it for a very, very busy Valentine's Day. So, but the idea is that I know that also that some people will talk about swingers as well, and right. So they're similar in the sense that having many partners, but in general, swingers are usually thought of more as someone, maybe a couple or people going out, swapping partners for the night and having some great wild sex. And that's what they do. And polyamorous usually think of it as having more than one relationship at a time, not just go out and they're fine to be used interchangeably if people wish, but generally that's how people think about it. polyamory is, many people believe is really our true nature, and that monogamy is not. And there's some great books out there that talk about that and decide and discuss why that might be. But either way, I think that polyamory is just a way for people to just explore all kinds of fun stuff that we're talking about, but not necessarily only with their partner. Not everybody can be everything to someone.
Right. So if you're polyamorous, it's not just sexual. It's like you're having different relationships with other people that go beyond sex.
Well, that's the great thing about it. It really depends. There are no rules in BDSM. There are no rules in polyamory except consent in both of them, right? So the reality is there are couples who consider themselves polyamorous and they invite people into their life. There are people who are completely, a triangle of people where we say that there's three people who are equally in love with each other, and there is just a three-person relationship. There are various different kinds. There are kinds where you have one person and they have two partners, and one of their partners has another partner, and and it gets extremely confusing after a while. But it's lots of fun to be confused like that.
That's wow. So are most people accepting of that, or do most people look inside and say, what's wrong with them?
Look, in the last bunch of years, it's become more open on Showtime. There's a show called Polyamory, and there's a lot of titillating sex on it as well. Might be a part of why it's such a successful show there. But there's been things similar to, say, 50 Shades of Grey. There's been a little bit more of showing polyamory into the world, and people get a chance to understand it a little better. There's I can't remember the name of the show, but there's the multiple wives shows and different.
Like the Mormon show.
Well, there's that, but there's also there's a couple of others. But the point is,
that they're escaping.
Yeah,
right
they're out there, right? So they're showing people that people do this, and again,
you're talking about the shows where the men have multiple wives and families with the wives.
Multiple partners. Yeah, I mean, I know that's the one that's the Mormon, and of course, modern day Mormons are not polyamorous, but in the past they were, and they consider it.
Is that considered polyamorous, but just on the man's part?
Well, it would be a polyamorous relationship. Somebody has many loves. So, again, remember, there's no strict term for it, and you could call it anything you like, but in general, all those shows are helping to desensitize a little bit people from having really, really bad reactions to, oh, you people are crazy. Why, how could you do that? And it just goes back to everything else. You've been socialized that it's wrong because religion and your everybody in your life's your lifestyle that you've had your whole life has told you that's bad, that's wrong. I don't believe it is. I believe that anything that consenting people do, not hurting somebody else, that if it makes you happy, you should be doing it.
I would agree to that.
It's hard to argue, right?
It is hard to argue because, especially if you're both adults and you both consent to it, what could be wrong with it? Especially what you do behind closed doors, it really should not concern anyone else.
Yeah, and people, people who are polyamorous or who are into BDSM or alternative sexuality in any way, you find people who are just, a lot of them are really much better adjusted than some of the people that you think would be the ones that are the better adjusted people, because there's no guilt, there's no shame. They've transcended that.
How did they transcend the guilt and the shame? Because that's huge, guilt and shame.
It is. Some people are lucky, and over the course of generations, they've had less and less. Maybe in our case, maybe their parents were people of the 60s who were a little bit more free love and that kind of thing. So we have some of those kind of people. We have people who've just, they've decided they don't want anything to do with the organizations that tell them that they are wrong, religion and social groups. And it's just I think it's a matter of people just sort of looking at themselves and realizing that their life is pretty much run by fear. Fear really runs everything if you think about it, right? So people have to get past that fear. Once you kind of get past that fear, then it's easier to sort of just go, oh, so I should just do whatever I want, huh? Yeah.
It opens up a lot of doors. I like it that you wrote in the book, so let go of your fears, seek truth, and find your integrity.
Yeah, that's sort of one of my little mantras. It's truth is really all there is. I mean, to me, that's what we're doing on this planet. We're here to figure out our truth.
Right, and everybody has a different truth.
That's right. We're all here to just kind of find our truth, and so yeah, find your inner truth.
Well, I'm so glad you came today. Thank you. So nice to have you, Bo Blaze.
Well, it was good to be here. We're done already? My God, that was quick.
Yeah, went fast, but we're going to have you back.
Okay, that sounds good.
For part 2.
Great.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching the Randi Lupo Show. Thanks for checking out the show. Be sure to follow Randi on Twitter at Randi Lupo. Visit her website at randilupo.com. Thanks to Broadband Box Office and VK Media. Have a great evening.
Hello, this is Dr. Barry Prstowski. I invite you to watch Courageous Doctors, an exciting new show on Broadband Box Office about how healthcare is affecting you today.